Now, today, we have a very special speaker, and he is not a stranger to God's anatomy for marriage. He is one of our core team members. He is one who is in the boat with us as we journey down this river, following the planner of this ministry. And he has a passion. He lives in South Africa. Currently, he's in the United States of America. But even with the time difference, he is normally 6 or 7 hours ahead of us. And so calculate that when we have a session at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock in the night, think about the time difference for him. And he faithfully comes to present because he has a passion to see marriages do well. And I thank God for this young man, and I bless God for him and for his passion for the work of the Lord. And so I know you're in excellent hands. So we're going to look tonight on a topic called healing from childhood trauma and emotional wounds. And he's very, very, very well equipped to handle this topic. And of course, he can handle any question that you can throw at him. He's well equipped to handle. So he normally intersperses his presentation with questions. So begin to get the rollers of your mind working now. So if you have questions, make a note of it so that when he pauses for questions, you are ready with a question. So I want to welcome at this point Reverend Errol Carrim, and he is going to present to us today. So stay tuned and enjoy what the Lord has prepared through him. Reverend Karim, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Rev. Thank you very much, and good evening to all. And I know I can say good evening to all now, and for all of us, we are in the evening, I think. But it is indeed a joy and a pleasure to be with you here this evening to share with you, what I believe that the Lord has helped me over the years to become a passion of mine. And yes, been on this journey for the past 4 years, over 4 years with Reverend Lawrence, and this is something that the facilitator has created for us to do this work, and because we believe in the institution of marriage. So welcome to the couples that were newly married, and welcome to the engaged, and anybody single if you're not engaged, if you just, you're dating or you're planning dating. I just want to say welcome, and this is a topic that I'm passionate about. I'm studying it more. I'm really wanting to understand it so I can really continue to use it in my own life to begin with, but then also pass it on to others. So also, I do need to warn you that the conversation is a bit gets a bit heavy, gets a bit challenging, but I think it's necessary because I think we need to learn how to get into those spaces and learn to allow God to bring healing in our lives in those places for us. So tonight, I just want you to know that you will feel discomfort or whatever, but I want you to be engaged. I want you to just allow the Holy Spirit to just move in your heart and speak to you tonight as we engage in this conversation. Okay, so I want to begin here. I want to say to you that your emotions are shaped by the content of your mind. Okay, how you experience life emotionally is based on what's in your mind. So when Paul says to renew your mind, he knows that if when our minds are renewed, it'll begin to change our emotions. Let me kind of unpack that for a little so you understand why I'm saying that. Because think about when we have an emotional experience, we are reacting to something in us. It's a value that we hold. Is either that value is being appreciated, so we're happy. Let's say you value curry chicken, and you walk in the house and you smell curry chicken. You're going to feel happy because that is, I'm talking about food because I love to eat and I love to cook. So that's my go-to analogy, I guess. But it's because of your knowledge of the taste of chicken, curry chicken, and how you love it. When that value is appreciated, by your spouse, by your girlfriend, by your parents, by whoever, by the restaurant, you get happy. So you get a happy emotion. Okay. On the other hand, you don't like rice because you've tasted it, you know what it is, it's in your head, it's your thought about it. So when you smell the cooking of rice, you get an emotion as well. It's not a happy one. Now it's an unhappy one. So if I'm saying anything to you tonight, if you're hearing me anything, I want to say your emotions are shaped by the content of your mind. So what's in your mind is going to determine your emotional response to life. Okay. So let's go with that. Just keep that in mind. Okay. The person who doesn't hold the same values like you do, who thinks that sex outside of marriage is okay, then for them, that sense of value to do that, they're not crossing any line. They're happy and excited to do it because that's a value they hold. That's a good thing to do. On the other hand, the person who holds sex outside of marriage as a thing that they shouldn't do, it's a high value of theirs, that they want to do it the way God wants them to do it. When that value is violated, then that brings pain and that brings. So just keep that in mind as we go. And maybe the challenge here for you is to start thinking, what are the things that triggers in me behaviors, emotions? What are the thought patterns I carry? And how all the more important it is for us to let the word be what fill our minds so that we could respond in ways that honors God and helps us to have more control from our emotions. And these content of our minds that triggers our emotions come from way back in childhood. Things we experience that we live into that we don't even realize it. And you might recognize some of that in this conversation tonight. I usually put this up here just as a reminder. Some of you will probably see it for the first time, but I would just want to remind you of that we understand who we are. So for one thing, we are by nature who we are, the way we were born, the way God created us. Okay? We are all unique. We are all fearfully and wonderfully made. We all bear the image of God, and God designed us to be who we are because we are His creation. So that's by nature, you are a particular person the way you are. God brought you into this world the way He created you to be. Then the second part of you, who you are, it's your nurture. From that birth into this world to how you were nurtured in those years when you were vulnerable and when you were left to be nurtured by those adults around you to help you to grow up in a safe environment, or in some cases, an environment that it wasn't safe, so you had to put up with abuse and whatever. But that's nurtured you into the kind of person then you become as an adult because you were shaped in those years of nurturing to respond to life in a certain way, either in a positive way or negative ways. And that shaped you in your nurturing. But when you put the nature and the nurture, the person you become then as an adult is a matter of choice. Because what you discover is while I had no control over how I came into this world, I had no control how I was nurtured because I was vulnerable and I was left in the hands of the people around me to care for me and shape me. And some shaped me in a healthy way, some shaped me in an unhealthy way. As an adult now, I have a choice. I can choose how I want to live my life and deal with the issues that gets in the way of me living that life. So I want to be a person who don't allow anger to control me. Although that's the way I was nurtured, that when I'm angry, I was allowed to say what I want, or behave how I want, to do what I wanted. But now, as a follower of Jesus Christ, I don't want anger to control me. Then I have to deal with the nurturing that I received and correct that, change my thinking, get healing in the places that I was wounded, so that anger doesn't control me anymore. I now will choose the way I respond in dealing with my anger. Okay. So at the end of the day, we all have a choice. That choice is left to us. We make the choice as to how we want to go and how we're going to do it. Okay. All right. So I want you to just keep that in mind. Nobody is responsible for what you become as an adult but you. Not your spouse, not your parents, not who raised you, your guardian, whoever. At the end of the day, as an adult, you are responsible for you. You can't pass that blame on to anybody else. You must do the work to experience the healing that makes you the kind of person that honors God. Because at the end of the day, the Bible tells us very clearly in Romans that we all are going to stand before God to give an account for this life that we live. Paul also reminds us in Corinthians as well. We're going to stand before God to give account for this life that we live, the good things we did and the bad things we did. We have to account for it. So you and I are responsible for who we are. That's nobody else's responsibility. Okay. So understanding then how this emotional thing starts, it starts in it starts in the brain. And like I said to you, what's in you is going to cause the reaction that you will have. But when we experience some information, it whether we smell it, we see it, we taste it, we hear it, or we are touched. However, we take that information and it goes straight to the brain instantly. Okay. If you hear a song, if you smell something that when you were growing up, you smell something that you love. So now as an adult, when you smell that, that information goes to your brain and it's registered instantly into your brain. But once it registered into there, um, it goes into three places instantly. One, it goes into the frontal cortex. That's your executive brain. That's where you make all your rational decisions. That's where you can tell right from wrong. You can do the right thing. You can delay gratification. You have control of who you are. People don't control you when you're living there. That's where you make all your healthy, rational decision. It's your frontal cortex. It's the rational brain where the rational process takes place. While it goes there, it also goes in the amygdala. The amygdala is at the base of the brain, right in here, and that's your emotional center for your brain. And so that gives the emotional response to everything. Okay. So what happens though is when you get the information and it goes into your brain instantly and it goes to these three places instantly, the amygdala responds 5 times faster than the frontal cortex. So you have an emotional response before you could really process what it is really happening, especially if what's happening reminds you of or brings up a trauma that you're carrying. Okay. So let's say, for example, I have a trauma of snakes when I was a little boy, about 6 or 7. I saw this really big snake, and so it created this really huge, it probably wasn't as big as I saw it when I was that age, but it traumatized me that I have a phobia for snake. Okay. So now someone puts a rubber snake in a place where I see it. When I first see that thing, I don't think, oh, it's a rubber snake. That's my rational brain, right? It's a rubber snake. What am I, no. My emotional trauma from seeing that snake when I was that age is what kicks in first, the emotions. Okay. Before I could say, so I jump back or I yell or whatever because my emotions kicks in faster than my frontal cortex. Okay. But the compound issue, there's hippocampus right in the back, the brain right here. That hippocampus is where all your memories are stored. Everything you possibly experienced is stored in there. And that responds 10 times faster than the frontal cortex. So you see what's going to happen now. I see this rubber snake. The memory of that snake I saw and the emotions comes flooding in long before I could process this is a rubber snake. So I experienced this traumatic screaming, yelling, whatever, and then someone is saying, it's a rubber snake, it's a rubber snake. Well, initially, I'm not going to respond that way. I am going to respond in a way that says my memory and my emotions is the first reaction, and then I get to rational. That's why sometimes when we get really upset, it's best for us to take a walk. We need to cool down because emotions and memories are kicking in. So we say things that we are sorry about. We react to people in anger out of our own pain and not recognizing that this is really about me. By the time you get to the frontal cortex to process that, now you have to apologize. I didn't mean to do this, or I didn't mean to do that. And in some cases, we don't apologize. We think we're right to behave the way we do, you know. So the Bible again cautions us, we need to deal with all the rage that we have. We can't live like that. But to deal with that is not merely to pray about it and to fast and to call upon God. This is the work you have to do. Recognize where it's coming from and invite God to help you to heal in those places. Okay. So the problem then we face is that our rational process is much slower than our emotional and memory process. And that is a battle for us every day. It's the way we were made. Okay. So the emotional process the emotions wouldn't go away. The memory would not go away. Okay, you just have to know this is how it happens, so then you can begin to deal with it. So now when I begin to change my thinking about that big snake I saw when I was that young and realized, yes, that was scary and that was really frightening, and I get to process that and I get to say, Lord, just I need you to help me to heal from this fear of snakes because, as a kid, it was traumatizing then. So I recognize the need and I invite God to bring healing. And then next time I see a rubber snake, I would have that visceral reaction. I am more aware now because I'm not so afraid of seeing a snake because my memory and my emotions are not in full control to overtake me in terms of being able to process it in a rational way. So the challenge for us then is to be aware of this process because this is true for all of us. And secondly, you need to take responsibility for your response and your reaction in every situation. Now, let me just, those two words, the response and reaction, we use them interchangeably, but I use them intentionally so they're different. Okay. Your reaction is when you are overtaken and you react emotionally. Okay. A response is when you choose the way you're going to respond to the situation. So you're not given just an emotional reaction. You don't just get mad, because someone said something and all of a sudden you blow up. That's a reaction. A response is you get angry and you say, I am angry and I'm in control of this. I'm not going to blow up on you. I'm not going to call you names. I'm going to express my anger because I am choosing the way I'm responding. When I have a reaction, I say things and behave in ways. Paul says, be angry and sin not. Anger leads to sin when I'm reacting. I don't sin in my anger when I'm responding because I'm in control. And that's a huge thing that's couples that you have to keep in mind how you interact with your spouse, how you interact with with the person you engage to, the person you're in relationship with. You have to recognize that you are responsible for how you respond to that person. And don't react and blame them and say, well, if you didn't do this, if you didn't say that, you are responsible for you. Okay? All right. Let me just through a quick biblical walk here. This is a long presentation on this, but I just want to introduce you to it. For you to understand how our emotions come to be damaged and what leads to the traumatic experience we experience as we go. Before the fall, to the end of Genesis 2, it ends with God blessing the marriage and saying, for this reason, a man should leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. God's creation was great. Everything was put in place. Okay. But then we see in chapter 3, Satan, the serpent enters into the conversation, and there's a whole other conversation as to all that, but I'm just moving you through it. He comes to Eve and talks to her, and she listens to him, and Adam was right there. She gave him the fruit, and they both ate. And now we're down to verse 7. After in verse 6, when she gave it to him and he ate as well, then read in verse 7 of Genesis chapter 3. At that moment, their eyes were open, and they suddenly felt shame at their nakedness. There was no shame in God's creation before the fall. Shame is an emotion that came because of sin. Okay. That's a consequence. That's a console. Right here we see damaged emotion, shame. Then we go to chapter 8, when the Lord in the cool of the evening, the breeze was blowing, the man and his wife heard the Lord walking in the garden and they hid. Okay, before they never hid, before they just walked and God came and they were there and it was good. But now sin has entered in. Now they're feeling shame and they hid. So we see hiding comes into the picture. Okay. And then when God said, why are you hiding? He said, well, I, I heard you walking in the garden, so I hid. I was afraid because I was naked. So shame, hiding, and now we have fear. Okay. He was afraid. And the fourth thing we see is when God said to Adam, why did you do this? He replied, it was the woman you gave me. So he takes no responsibility. He blames God. So four things now enter into the picture of humankind after the fall, the fall: shame, hiding, fear, and blaming. And my friends, those four things underlies all of our struggles. Are they experiencing one of them, all four of them, three of them, two of them? They shape our brokenness. It is what we struggle with all the time. We have fear about things that are in us and how we deal with things and how we speak up and how we say things. We have shame. Okay. Now, shame and guilt are two different things. Guilt is necessary to make us aware when we do something wrong so that we can correct that. Shame is saying you are no good. Guilt said, I have done something wrong. Shame says, you are what's wrong. So, shame, hiding, fear, blaming are results of sin. And this is where the brokenness, the emotional brokenness, enters into humankind. This is how it all became part of who we are. And this is what we're working towards healing from till we get to the other side, where there'll be no more shame, no more hiding, no more fear, no more blaming. We will be fully restored to what things were prior to Genesis chapter 3. We're making the circle. Okay. Here is some God offers us healing then, you know. For I will restore the health to you, and your wounds I will heal. We're talking about those wounds that I just described to you earlier there that occurred in Genesis 3. Again, he says, when the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all of their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and crushed in spirit. Brokenhearted is emotional, crushed in spirit, emotional. So these are the things that God has promised to help us with, to bring healing for. And he says he heals the brokenhearted and he heals their wounds. Again, he's talking about what God is promising to do for us, and how he wants to help us in our need for him and the healing that we need. Again, just a reminder to us of what Christ died on the cross to do for us is to deliver us from the brokenness, the emotional wounds and brokenness that we all have as we follow him. So let's talk a little about how this all got started. And one other Reverend Lawrence sent me a verse this morning that ties into this. First Peter 2:24. His wounds have healed ours. His wounds have healed ours. So again, reflecting what we are talking about here, these emotional wounds that we are all dealing with. The wounds of Jesus Christ brings healing, but you don't experience that healing until you invite him to bring that healing for you. Okay. All right. So just moving along then, what are emotional wounds? They're a set of human experiences that cause pain and anguish on the deep psychological level. These types of wounds often involves a lasting hurt caused by a friend, family, colleague, or someone we trust. We all have experienced emotional wounds. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So this is not saying your parents were bad or whatever. What I'm saying is they're wounded and they passed on that. And that's, we just pass it on. We do the best we know how, but we say and do things that leave emotional wounds. And just remember this, from the womb to about age 9 or 10, the only way a child registers communication is emotionally. They remember those emotional experiences because they haven't developed the ability in their minds yet to process abstract thought, to know what a word mean or what is really being said. So when it's said in certain ways, if it's harsh, if it's meant to embarrass, if it's a beating, whatever, they will register it emotionally, and those years shape um, the emotional foundation for when they become adults. This is out of those emotional experiences they draw from in their adulthood as they mature into adulthood. So all of the experiences that we have shape us. We have good memories, pleasant emotions, being loved and being hugged and being cared for and being made to feel safe and all of those things. Then we have these memories of being abused and disrespected and called names and all of that. So the wounds are just passed on. So they may develop from a single traumatic event. Might be something like I described the snake. That's a traumatic event. To see a little kid sees a big snake, that's traumatizing. Especially if no adult come around that little kid to help them to understand that and to calm their fears and make them feel it's okay and it's all right. And if no one attend to you in the midst of the trauma, that trauma registers even more deeply. Okay. So it could be a traumatic event, or it could be over repeated over time. You're stupid. Why you can't be like your brother? Why you can't be like your sister? What's the matter with you? I wish you weren't born, and I don't know, you were a mistake, and all of those things we hear help to create wounds that we all live with. So emotional pain then can be experienced in the form of guilt, shame, embarrassment, hatred, jealousy, anger, frustration. All those are emotions. That's how we could experience those pains, those wounds that we carry. Okay. All right. Any questions so far?
I have one more question. The question is, what about when emotional wounds become strongholds?
Yep. Okay. That requires work, because if it becomes a stronghold, I mean it's very traumatic and it's defining your life now. So it's getting the people around you to help you, and not just run to a place of and interpret it just purely as a spiritual thing that you're trying to break down. You have to deal with the emotion. So it means getting the counseling you need, a professional who knows what they're doing, and I am very careful, because a lot of counselors, all they try to do is try to get you to change the way you're thinking. They just work in your head. Yeah, that's how I started off. But over the years, as I developed, and God helped me to learn things and taught me things, I realized just trying to get your head to change doesn't heal the wound that you're carrying. So I must help you get to that place where you experience that wound. So I need to change your head, but I can't. If I change your head and I don't help you to deal with the wound, then all you end up doing is, for a while you think good and everything going fine, then something happens, it triggers the wound, and you're back there again. So it means if it's a stronghold, you need spiritual, psychological, emotional, sometimes physical. You need all the support. Okay. Sometimes you need just to be um, isolated from people, where you can get the focus attention you need, whatever it takes. But hear what I'm saying. It's a stronghold because it is so damaging an experience you had that it controls you. And now it takes a lot to break that from you. And it's the work of doing that and recognizing I need God to help me. And God will send the people. God will send you to the right people. Um, and you will find that you'll get the healing. So when it becomes a stronghold, to that extent where it defines your life, it means you need to recognize I can't simply keep playing songs or hope it'll go away. I need to do the work, reach out and get the help I need so I can be free from this stronghold in my life.
Thank you so
Okay.
much. Yes, thank you. There are no more questions.
Okay. All right. So I just want to show you 5 ways in how experience emotional trauma, emotional wounds that we carry. And you might identify some of this. It might bring back some memories for you. It might feel uncomfortable. But I just wanted to just kind of awaken your mind to where these things come from. Okay. So to bear in mind, you already come into the world. Okay. Already from the womb, we already started experience emotions. Depends on what your mother was going through when she was having you. If she was abused, if she was alcoholic, if she was safe, whatever was going on, if she had to fight, struggling for money, whatever. You everything she experienced, excuse me, you have experienced it, you come into the world. Now to add on top of that, in these, especially these vulnerable years from the womb till about 8 or 9, as I said earlier, you're registering things emotionally. So here we go. One of the ways we get these traumas and these wounds is through sexual abuse. And again, sexual abuse is defined in so many ways, but it's anything that was done to you that was meant to be sexual, that for the person who was doing it to you, you know. And so it could be pornography, it could be how you were touched, it could be things they say to you. They're laughing at your body, they're making fun of your breasts or your, or your penis or whatever. And all of those things stays with you. Okay? They leave wounds with you, especially, and then if you were sexually abused, sometimes you're sexually abused as a little boy or a little girl, made to perform sexual acts on people and all that as a little child, that you're not even understanding that, but it's registering, and it's going to show up as an adult to create huge problems for you. A lot of couples I deal with, in a lot of marriages, sexual issues, even trouble to conceive, finds its root in sexual abuse. Okay. But a lot of marriages struggle here because one partner has sexual abuse for no time for sex in the marriage, and they're struggling because one person is shutting down, they're afraid, they're crying, can't turn on the light, whatever, and it's all coming out of that. So that's one place we can spend a whole session talking about that. But that's just to raise your awareness that, and some people would have experienced sexual abuse and not even be aware of it until they're helped. I remember working with a lady, she was like in her 50s, and she was really wrestling with some anger and some issues in her life and the way she treated her husband, all of that. And we did some work, and you know what we ended up doing? We worked that till one day she actually was able to see herself as a little girl laying in her cot being sexually abused by her caretaker. So sometimes it's so deep, it's buried, but it registers and it'll come back. But in the meantime, it's alive and it's working in you and it's causing you to behave in ways, but you're not even sure where it's coming from. But it's because you're carrying it and it's there. Okay. Then physical abuse, again, here's where we are just physically abused in order to keep us obedient as children. We experience it. And so now that leaves trauma. Somebody raised their voice, they raise their hand or whatever, and we immediately feel the fear inside of us. We start feeling anxious and all these things that's happening to us because we're carrying those scars, those wounds from when we were abused physically. And I want to say to you, while I'm talking about the scars they leave for you, if they're not dealt with, you will repeat the same thing. So oftentimes people who rape, people who are sexually abusing, they were sexually abused as well. Same thing, people who are physically abusive in their experience as kids, they probably were sexually and physically abused as well. So we're talking about how you experience it, but we also need to make you aware. You can also repeat it if you don't deal with it. And then the verbal abuse, some parents said, I never spanked my child. But the things you heard growing up, you're stupid, you're an idiot, wish you didn't born, or where you come from, I'm not your father, I'm not your mother, you're not, so, or your sibling making fun of you, laughing at you, just saying things to you, okay? And when we say things to kids and they cry, we think it's funny because we call them a name or whatever. Well, that leave wounds. See, they struggle with self-esteem. I remember that in my own life, when I was growing up as a little kid, they would call me names and laugh at me and think that was funny. And anytime they see me, they call me that name and I start crying, everybody start laughing. So they saw it a way to, but that created for me, a sense of low self-esteem because, I didn't feel I was anybody, you know. So those things, this seem simple, but as nobody hit me, they just said things to me. Okay. So, but of verbal abuse to control you, call your name, swear at you, yell at you, and instill fear in you, leaves emotional wounds, as well as spiritual abuse. Some of us suffered spiritual abuse. It's a distortion again and exploitation of spiritual authority to manipulate, control, to use or harm others, mostly through shame and fear. Again, I experienced this. I was waking up in the morning and I had to go to church. 5:30, I must get to the Catholic church, as a kid. And if I overslept and I didn't go to church, and the adults they didn't go, they slept. But if they woke up and I didn't go to church, I got a beating. Okay. So I had to make sure to do these things. So there's this way, where we use all of the Bible and all of the the spiritual ways, but it's not to help and bring hope and healing. It's to control people. Okay. But it's a form of abuse. And we see it a lot. Well, a lot of adults experience that now. They sit under a leader who is misrepresenting the word, who comes up with the authority and tell them what to do, and they have no say. And the leader is completely manipulating them for his or her own end. But we experience this as children as well when we are made to be afraid of God. God is going to come, you're going to go to hell, he's going to judge you, all kind of thing. Wait till God see you doing this. And they use all of these fearful ways. So now we grow up as adults and we have this God that we're afraid of, you know. But Jesus says, "Come unto me, all who are labor and heavy laden." But you're thinking, you will instill fear about God rather than the love of God. That's what we call spiritual abuse. And then the final of the five is emotional abuse. Again, emotional abuse includes any behavior intended to control, manipulate, threaten, or belittle another person. So, I'm using just the silent. Okay, I'm not talking. I am intentional. You know, I'm yelling, constant criticism, control, telling you what to do. Contempt how I treat you, threaten you, accusation, and I'm saying these things, and I'm not even yelling. I'm just saying them. But my goal is to make you feel bad. When you feel bad, then I feel good. So parents, adults, they do that. Say things just meant to hurt you, just meant to make you feel bad. They're abusing you emotionally. We find a lot in marriages as well, where a lot of sarcasm, a lot of things being said to each other, and it creates all of this pain and all of this, sense of build walls. And I said it to couples a lot of time. When you build these emotional walls, they're very hard to tear down. Every time you say something, you lay a block, you lay a brick, an emotional brick that keeps going up and up and up, and it's all coming out of these emotional ways of abusing. Blame, it's never your fault. It's somebody to blame, and so your spouse tells you this, and you find a way to turn it around and make them feel guilty. You're stonewalling. You're not giving an answer. They need to sort this out, but you're just stonewalling, and or you're gaslighting. And this is a popular thing now, making people believe when they come and they confront you with truth, when you finish, you're making them believe that they are the problem. You say things are wrong, so you say things that are not true, but over time it kind of sounds like it's true. Or you're isolating, or you have mood swings, all meant to manipulate people. Okay, so you experience that with a parent who is good, you know, for time, and next time they're not all that good, and they're emotional, and next 1 minute they're laughing and they're happy, and next minute you can't speak to them, they're yelling at you. So these emotional mood swings shaping you as well. Okay, so my example was I grew up around people who were so emotional, literally, no exaggeration. I'll get up in the morning and everybody's fine. And about 2 hours later, you can't say hi to this one. They're not talking to you. Their faces swell, as we say in Trinidad, their face swell up and you can't talk to them. Okay. So for me to this day, I can't deal with people who are emotional like that, who have these mood swings. So I am aware of that. I know where it's coming from. So so if I'm around someone like that, which I have to work with people like that, I remind myself I need to go to my frontal cortex. Don't let my memory and my emotions shape my response to that person. I need to deal with that person with who they are, where they are, because I am aware that that's a trigger for me because I grew up in that. Okay. So those are the kind of things when I say emotional abuse. But here's the thing I want you to keep in mind. All form of abuse, sexual, spiritual, physical, verbal, emotional, they all have one thing in common. Fundamental forms of abuse are emotional wounds, fundamental to all. They all leave you with emotional wounds. Okay. That's how you remember them. That's how you carry them. And some are more traumatic than others, that you could be held in bondage by them. You can have a stronghold on your life because it's so traumatic. Okay. Um, Emotional wounds are the direct consequence of sin, which resulted in broken relationship. That's what we're talking about tonight. The trauma you carry, the wounds you carry, they're emotional because of how you experience life, especially in those formative years. And I know that's what I just went through there. Some of you are sitting there with some emotions that are stirring in you. Is I am sure it connected you to something that was said there that it's, but don't try to avoid it or run from it. You need to sit with it so you know where it's coming from. And that's how you get the healing. Okay. So your childhood wounds are exposed through adult relationships. Like I said to you earlier, those childhood formation years, now you're an adult, that's where they're going to be exposed. And if you do little to confront them, they can ruin your life. People go from relationship to relationship looking for something better and not realizing it's in them. Go from job to job, they go from church to church, you know, they're looking for something. And what they're looking for is really to find the healing that they need so they can be okay with themselves and with others as they walk with Christ. Now, I may be sounding as though, where is God in this? All right? God is in this. But let me say this to you. God doesn't force himself on us. God didn't force himself on Adam and Eve and say, hey, stop. I tell you not to do this. You can't do this. Get away from that tree. Serpent, you get out of here, and this is over. No, God does not operate that way. He gives us the freedom. We have to invite God for him to come in. Okay. So accepting him as your Lord and Savior is the first step. But the healing and the maturity and the growth that it requires to grow in your Christian life, you have to do the work and identify those areas in your life and ask God to bring healing in those places in your life. Okay. So he is in it. The Spirit is with you, but it's not something that's done for you unconsciously. Something has to be done intentionally as you invite God in those experiences and places, because you have to forgive people. A person who physically abused you as a child or sexually abused you as a child, they might still be around. They might be carrying on as if it doesn't mean anything to them. You have to forgive them, not necessarily go and tell them you forgive them, but you have to forgive them in your heart so you can move on with your life, or else you will still be imprisoned. And I say to people all the time, somebody did something to you 20 years ago when you were a child, or 30 years ago when you were a child, because you were vulnerable and they were supposed to protect you and they hurt you. Now you're an adult. You cannot allow this person to keep hurting you. Now, if they're hurting you as an adult, it is you allowing it. It no longer when I say they're hurting you, it doesn't mean they're doing anything to you now, but the pain you're carrying from that wound is shaping your life now. You are allowing that now because you're an adult. You have to do the work as an adult to be healed from that. So that experience of being abused as a child becomes a memory that's a stepping stone that you can talk about in a way to bring healing for others, rather than a prison that keeps you there and you can't live your life, and you see this person and you hear their name and you get upset, and you're mad at God and you're mad at your family for talking to this person, and all of that going through your head because you are imprisoned by it now as an adult. You need to do the work to be free from it, to forgive that person so you could move on. That's the work you have to do. When Jesus says to forgive, he starts with the worst relationship we can have. He says, forgive your enemies. The person who's trying to destroy you, the person who don't like you, the person who want the worst for you. He says, start there. You know why? Because the forgiveness is not for the enemy. The forgiveness is that you can be free to live your life in him, through him, and for him. That's the work we have to do. And I'll be honest, for some of us, the pain is so deep, the trauma is so deep that it's not a simple task of saying, I forgive this person. You have to walk through the pain and the tears and go over it and walk through it and get the professional help to do it where you can be freed from it, because you have to heal from the wound. You just don't jump and say, well, I forgive them. It's not that simple. How many times have you say, well, yeah, I forgive that person. But then you see them later and you can tell the way they treat the person or the way they talk about the person, or it's not true. So don't just say, I've forgiven them. You need to walk through to be healed from the wound that they have caused you, to know that the forgiveness is true. Okay? All right. So wounds damage our self-worth, change how we view the world, cause trust issues, and dictate how we will interact with other people. That's what I'm talking about. If you were abused sexually, then you have a very negative view of sex. That's how you view sex. That's how you come into the world about it. That's how you're going to approach it. Okay. If you were betrayed, then you have trust issues. You always want to know where your spouse is. You always want to know everything about it. You want to see the phone. You want to know where the car is. You want to know how much money they spend. You want to know everything because you have trust issues. Okay. It's not your spouse. It's about you. Okay. So when we get wounds, when we are damaged by them, that's just how we show up. Okay. That is how we interact with people. So, Ayana, this is what Ayana says. Until you heal the wounds of your past, you are going to bleed. You can bandage the bleeding with food, with alcohol, with drugs, with work, with cigarette, with sex, but eventually it will ooze through and stay in your life. We can't hide it all. It will show up eventually. Is what she's saying here. It will show up, okay? And it will mess things up big time. So you need to deal with those things that you're trying to hide and bandage with these different behaviors, or whether it's social media, whatever you use to as you go to. When you feel the pain, you just go to whatever makes you feel good. Some people eat, some people they work long hours. You think they're hard workers. No, they just don't want to show up in the pain. So they lose themselves in the job, or they smoke, or they choose sex, or they choose spending money, or whatever. Something new, something nice again, so they feel good. Go shopping, and then they feel better, and then they carry until the next time again when some emotional pain comes up, they go shopping again. So next thing they're in debt, or they're buying things they don't need, and they're going on and on trying to cover the pain of what they're feeling. So as our insensitivity, this is important. I thought I wanted to highlight this. As our insensitivity to our own feelings grow, when we're not paying attention to what we're really feeling, our lives often begin to leak all kind of negative emotions. So when I'm not paying attention to my negative emotions, by what I'm feeling, and I'm just blaming other people without realizing it, I go about feeling frustrated, unappreciated, resentful, exploited, lonely, put upon. Everybody's blaming me for everything. I'm needy, I'm angry, and I'm acting in ways that let these negative emotions overflow towards others. If you didn't hear anything I say tonight, take this. Your insensitivity to your feelings and what's going on in your life emotionally is what makes you walk around feeling negative, unappreciated, resentful, exploited. Nobody loves me. You treat me this way. You don't care about me. You go on and on and on. It is because it is you that's feeling that, and you need to know why. But your insensitivity to it makes you think it's other people that's causing it. Really, it's you, it's me, and we need to face it. All right. So if we're in touch with our feelings, these emotions could be moments of truth for us, warning us that we are heading for trouble. Okay? So if you realize right now I am so upset, and I just gonna go and I'm going to go to the restaurant, I'm gonna buy food or whatever, or I'm gonna buy a shirt. When you realize that you're doing that because you're paying attention to emotions, you realize this is not good. I'm heading for trouble. I shouldn't be doing this. I know where this is coming from. See. So they can be the raw material for soul searching and meditative exploration of what is going on in our lives. That's what I said. We don't know how to sit in the discomfort. If you sit in the discomfort and you're paying attention, you realize this is not going to end well. I've been there before. I need to sit with this because I need to deal with this. But for a lot of us, we just run with it and allow the trouble to come. And then we blame somebody or we blame something. Friends, it's you. It's me. We have to learn to sit with it. It becomes the soul-searching, meditative exploration of what is really going on in our lives. Okay? All right.
Yes, just a comment in the chat. Somebody
Go ahead.
says, feeling like I'm getting steamrolled right now.
Yes, I hear that. I hear that totally. That's how it feels sometimes, because you're recognizing things that you haven't seen in a way now that makes you realize it's different. It's not what I thought it was, and I can deal with it. If it's anything I'm saying to you, we can deal with it. So thank you for that. Okay. Here's one of my favorite quotes. I don't know who said it, but I got it and I kept it. If you don't heal from what hurt you, you will bleed on people who didn't cut you. Okay? Think about that. Somebody yelling at you, somebody mistreating you, and you have nothing to do with it. This is one of the reasons that second marriages have like a 60% chance of divorce, and third marriages have about like a 70% chance of divorce. Because people come into the second marriage being hurt from the first marriage. They didn't heal from it, so now they're bleeding on the spouse in the second marriage. And so we go someplace else. Okay? And this is what it looks like. Our emotional wound shows up in your life. Fear, anger, name calling, judgmental. Judgmental means I know what you do, and I could tell you why you did it, and I could tell you the reason, and we don't find out the information. We just come to our conclusions. Comparing, criticizing, unforgiving, these are all the ways our emotional wounds show up in our lives with our spouse, our girlfriend, our boyfriend, our parents, our co-workers, with ourselves. We don't treat ourselves well. And Jesus says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So if you can't deal with your wounds to bring healing in your own life, to treat you with respect and compassion and love and care for yourself, you can't give that to other people. You can't give what you don't have. So you'll tell yourself you love your neighbor, but the kind of love you give into your neighbor is not the kind of love that Jesus offers us that we can give to others. The love we give to the neighbor is a love that says, I love your neighbor, you better love me back. If you don't love me, you're going to love somebody else who can love me back. The kind of love Jesus says to love yourself first is to recognize how loved you are, how important you are. You're committed, creating God image. You value who you are. You have healthy boundaries for who you are. You take care of who you are. So you could love your neighbor. You can help your neighbor. And when you love your neighbor in that way, if your neighbor accepts the love, great. If your neighbor rejects the love, it doesn't change you from still loving, because your motivation for loving is not based on whether your neighbor accepts it or rejects it. Your motivation for loving is coming from inside because you know what it is to be loved. So you want to love. That's what Jesus taught us to do. We are to love like Jesus loved. But we can't do that when we are walking on all these emotional wounds in us, looking for somebody somewhere to hang the blame on rather than taking responsibility for our own well-being. Okay? All right. So here we go. First step, you have to identify how it exists in your life. Where is the wound in my life? What is it? This takes work. Okay? This takes work. Emotional wounds can easily be detected by looking at the difficulties you frequently experience in your life, particularly in relationship. That's where it starts. Okay? But you have to recognize, where is it? Don't ignore it. You see those behaviors in life that you know they're not healthy. They're coming from somewhere. Something is triggering it. Do the work to find where it's coming from. So the first step is you have to recognize your emotional wounds. We all have them. Okay. So that's where it starts. Acknowledging I have it and seeing where it's showing up. And it usually shows up in relationship. Yes, go ahead, Rev.
Comment in the chat. Sometimes we view healing as the absence of emotional feelings, but it's interesting to
Yes.
note that healing can be an intentional decision, which involves going through the feeling and being able to navigate the emotions appropriately while making conscious choices.
Yes, well said. Exactly. And I think that's the challenge for us in the church, because we go to church, Rev, and we feel good and we think whatever, something happens, something traumatic happened, and we just made to feel good and we think we're fine, you know, we're fine, but we haven't really gone to feel the emotion, where it's come from, and to be healed from it. And so it comes back up again. And we see people who've been in the church for 20 years, 25 years, but we don't see the maturity. Or they pray, they fast, they in church, they pay the tithes, they're stalwarts in the church, but the growth in their personal development hasn't changed. They could still lose the temper and embarrass you. They're still judgmental. They know, they still, treat certain people in certain way. Like, if their spouse had cheated on them and they're still single now, they don't trust uh the opposite gender anymore. And a whole host of behavior we see in solid Christians for years that represents emotional wounds that they're carrying that has not been healed. And we just live with it. We said, you know that Reverend Carrim, you don't get him angry because he has a temper. And everybody just think that's Reverend Carrim. He's a good Christian, he's a good preacher, he's a good everything else, but you just don't want to get him upset because he has a temper. And we accept that. And what our role is to help people to see that is a consequence of the fall. You're carrying wounds, you need to be healed, and help them to do that. Okay. So the first step, you must identify we all have wounds. What's your emotional wounds? And where is it coming from then? So the next thing is stop making other people the problem. I've said it in many different ways already tonight. Start to look at why so much of your emotional stability is based on how other people treat you. Just let that sit. Let that sit for a little while. Okay. Remember, your reaction is coming from inside of you. So if your emotional stability depends on how your spouse treats you, if they love you, or they said they didn't tell you they love you this morning, so now you depressed today, or you upset because they didn't tell you they love you, you're hurting because you know you're asking a broken person who, for whatever reason, will forget, or they have to deal with their own wounds. They didn't tell you they love you, and now your life's a mess because then they're not treating you the way you would like to be treated. It's shaping the way you are behaving and how your life is going. So now you're being shaped by the brokenness of your spouse rather than being able to be healed and say, I wonder why she didn't kiss me this morning, or why she didn't say this to me. I wonder what's bothering her, rather than you get upset because you didn't get what you thought you need. So start looking at why so much of your emotional stability is based on how other people treat you. That is a sign that there are wounds that you need to be dealing with. When your emotional stability depends on you, then you can set healthy boundaries. Then you can talk about to your spouse why they're not doing certain things in a way that in a healthy way, rather than a way of frustration or anger because you're not getting it, because your emotional stability is depending on them. But when you're in a healthy space, you can have that conversation. So what we see a lot of times, because people don't get what they want from their spouse, so they get involved with other people, or they do things and they say, well, my spouse didn't do this, my spouse didn't do that, and if you had done this and if you had done that, okay. So we say on this platform, there are no such thing as irreconcilable differences when it comes to a marriage that's built on the way God called us to live at the marriage. Because when we're in a healthy space emotionally, we could deal with the difficulty of our spouse not meeting our needs in a healthy way and have that conversation, and not judgmentally. And we can talk about this as a conversation in itself, but how we talk about those things shows where we are emotionally. So yeah, you have your sexual needs, and that's a responsibility we have to each other. If for whatever reason your spouse is not meeting those needs those lack of those needs can't be what's shaping your life, or how you're going to respond to your spouse, how you're going to respond in situation. You're aware of those needs, but because you are in a healthy space emotionally, you have boundaries. You can talk about this in a healthy way. You can say, maybe we need to get some help, what's going on here, because and we can have the healthy conversation. But when the stability depends on the treatment from the other person, those conversation never goes well. So this is the second step, right? You're responsible. You have to look at that. Okay. Start looking at why is that dependent on other people. And the third thing is um, to imagine yourself as having overcome your emotional wounds. So whichever one we're working with, if it's anger or whatever it is that, you know, imagine what life would be like. What would life be like if the trigger no longer reopened the pain of your emotional wounds? So when you were young, you were yelled at and you were slapped, so that created fear in you of adults. Now you're an adult, you have a boss who yells. When he yells, it brings up that same feeling of fear in you, and you kind of, you know, cower inside. Once, imagine what it would be like if my boss would yell and I could say, I wonder why is he yelling like that? I wonder what's the matter, you know. Or you could even say, you could be able to say to your boss, I really don't mind you speaking to me, but I don't appreciate you raising your voice at me. But that's when the trigger of his raised voice no longer triggers that fear in you, that little boy or little girl, when it was done to you by an adult. Now you're in control of that, and you can take a deep breath and you can say to your boss, I don't mind you speaking to me, but I don't appreciate you yelling at me. Or when the voice raised, it doesn't trigger the fear inside of you. That's what I mean when I say imagine what it would look like when you're healed from that wound. So that creates some kind of something you're working towards. You want to get to that place where you can do that. And so you invest in the time and the work in doing that. Okay. And the final step then is to practice mindfulness. So back to the earlier question, what are the steps? And this probably should be my first step, but it's the last one. Practicing mindfulness means being self-aware and present in the current moment. The statistic tells us, at least in America, that 75 to 80% of people live their lives unconsciously. They just go along with the day. Some of us have experienced that. Have you ever driven a route that you drive regularly every day? Sometimes you drive and you get to your destination, you didn't recognize that you're already there, and you pass all of the familiar things that you used to, right? When you learn to drive, you are paying attention to change the gear. If you learn to drive at a stick shift, looking in the rearview mirror, looking in the, all of that, making sure everything is fine. Now you don't think about it. Hit the car and you drive. Right? You mindlessly do it now because you can do it. A lot of us live life like that. We mindlessly live it. The challenge here for us to deal with our emotional state is to pay attention. So my phrase is be where you are, where you are. Learn to be in the moment. Learn to pay attention to words, to feelings. We can do a whole conversation on listening, but start paying attention when you hear somebody raising their voice, when talking to your spouse, and you feel something is rising up, and you pay attention to that. I know what I'm feeling right now. You could be able to say, "Hun, you know, right now I'm really feeling upset, or I'm feeling, can we?" But pay attention rather than just blowing up and letting it fly because you think you have a right to do it. But mindfulness practice means learning to live in the moment. When Paul says, to pray without ceasing, this is what he's talking about. He doesn't mean that you spend all your time just in a corner praying all day. What he's meaning is learn to be mindful of the moment, of where you are, of what you're doing, who you're talking to, what's happening. Learn to be mindful in the moment. Taste the tea, taste the food, hear the words. You know, I sit in my car and I pay attention to holding the steering. I pay attention to my body in the car, and I'm driving, and in the moment, mindfulness. You know, putting on your shoes, pay attention. Just all those little things develop mindfulness. When you're brushing your teeth, pay attention. So you develop the ability to live in the moment. So then when the emotions come up, you are very mindful, or you're very aware of them, and you can deal with them. But for those of us who are not mindful, the emotions take over, like I showed you earlier. The emotions and the memory take over. And then when we get into our minds, we already caused the damage. So we're learning to not let the emotions and the memory take over. We want to learn to develop the ability to stay in the moment through developing the processes part of our brain to learn to be present. Okay, so that is the fourth thing. So those four steps is really what I offer you as you learn to deal with your emotional wounds. Okay. You need to become aware of them. You need to ask yourself, why does my emotional stability depend so much on other people? You learn to imagine what it is to be healed from a particular wound. And most importantly, you need to learn to be in the moment all the time. Learn to stay present. Okay? One says, avoid holding on to your pain. There is no power gained from being a victim other than to deflect your wounds onto others to appease your suffering. Let me read that to you again. Avoid holding on to your pain. There is no power gained from being a victim other than to deflect your wounds onto others to appease your suffering. That's when you say, you blame your mother, you blame your father, you blame whoever. Keep blaming people when in truth and in fact, you're holding on to your pain. Second one, more often than not, unresolved emotional traumas will eventually take a toll on our physical health, on how we see ourselves, our relationship with others. And that's a whole nother conversation. I can talk to you about emotional wounds and and physical health, how that impact things we live with in life. We don't have to. They're merely emotional pains that are manifesting in physical ways. Trouble getting pregnant, back problems, digestion problems, migraine headaches, and all sorts of stuff are built on these things that we carry. And the healing is in the emotions, not just in the head, as most counselors tend to do. Okay, so there we go. But it's simply then, when emotional wounds are left unhealed, they can and will affect every aspect of our lives. You can't isolate it. It will show up everywhere, all the time. And that's me. Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Any other comment or observation?
There's a question in the chat.
Okay.
Would you say that couples considering marriage should work through and experience healing from these childhood traumas before entering into a marriage with their partner?
Okay. So there's a yes to that, and also there's a not necessarily, depends on where it's at, because you can't figure all this out now unless here's the thing, we'll be forever being healed emotionally until we see Jesus. Okay, so we're not going to be completely healed, but here's the thing that has to happen: recognizing your brokenness and working on that. But don't say to to your boyfriend, you have some issues you need to go deal with, or you have some childhood wounds you need to heal. You need, and depends on the kind of conversation you all having. My wife and I, we were friends for 2 years before we even started dating. But we every Friday night we went to this one restaurant and we read through this book together called The Friendship Factor, and we discussed what the book says, what it should be good friends and all of that. And so we had a kind of conversation going that we could ask certain questions. So as a engaged couple, then having the kind of conversation about our past and who we are and issues, and you're saying, I notice in me this, and I think I need to do some work here. That's the kind of conversation that brings it together, where um, you identify things you want to work with, but depends on the extent of your childhood wounds, traumas, will determine whether you need to resolve some things. If you see some issues in your boyfriend or your girlfriend that you realize, you know what, we need to resolve this because I can't see this marriage working with this temper. Then that's something you have to work with, you know, and say you need some help because I can't see us, because I do not appreciate the disrespect. I don't appreciate the blowing up, and so. But you have to have the kind of conversation around these things to decide what you need to deal with. So in some cases, yes. In some cases, you'll be dealing with things that you didn't even know about that'll come up after you get married. And boom, you realize what's going on here. It's a wound that you've been carrying that you're not even aware of, but it's triggered now that you're in a marriage that's going to require some work now. Okay. But the best thing you can do in this conversation tonight is take away the awareness that I have wounds. When I identify them, I need to seek the healing for them. You can't get the other person to do that. They have to want to do it themselves. But let them see the change in you and desire that in themselves. But yes, some things need to be addressed before you get married. And some things will be addressed after you get married. All right. One last comment, Rev,
Yes,
since nobody has
go
questions.
ahead.
I want to leave you all with this. Your healing from your emotional trauma and emotional wounds is your responsibility. You are not responsible for your spouse, for your boyfriend, for anybody else. Only you. Okay? And just hear that. You could see it leaking out in your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend. You could see it leaking out. You can see the behaviors we talk about here. But you can't bring that healing for them. They have to want that healing. But when you're in a healthy place, you could deal with it in a healthy way. You can set your boundaries, and you don't want to, start behaving in ways, and you want to go back home, you want to go back by your mother and your father and all of that kind of stuff, and because you have your own issues. But once you work with you, then you can deal with these things in a healthy way. That'll help your spouse. So again, the only person you're responsible for when it comes to healing from emotional wounds is yourself. The best you can do for your spouse, your boyfriend, or your girlfriend is to create a space for them that it's safe for them to deal with their own. Other than that, it's up to them. Thank you.
I am going to ask you, Rev, if you could pray for our couples, those dating, those
Yes.
engaged, and
Yes.
those who are already married, just in 1 year,
Yes.
just in their first year of marriage. And I pray
Yeah.
that, just pray for them. Pray for us,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, sure. Father, we just give you praise tonight. We thank you for the amazing God that you are. Thank you for loving us unconditionally, embracing us, providing for us everything we need in this life to live holy lives unto you. We thank you. Lord, we thank you that even as brokenness entered this world, Lord, you didn't remove yourself in your holiness from us, but you chose to show up in Jesus, to show how much you love us and to invite us back into that holiness. Lord, as we seek you and turn to you to bring healing in those places in our lives that have been broken by sin. And tonight, Lord, I pray for each one within the sound of my voice, for these newlywed couples, for these who are thinking about marriage, Lord, for those who are still even looking for someone to be married. I pray, the Lord, that you help them to recognize more than anything else here tonight that their healing is their responsibility. And that, Lord, they should seek you with all their heart and look at those areas in their lives that need your touch and to sit with it long enough, whether they need counseling or to just sit with a friend or pray or just sit in the quiet and allow you to take them to those places where these pains are coming from, so that, Lord, they can be healed and be transformed by the renewing of their minds, and their emotions begin to change because of the content of their minds. So I pray tonight, Lord, that you will bless them. Build strong marriages tonight, Lord. May they recognize, oh God, how much you love them and how you want a long lifetime of a covenant to be lived out between these couples that are on this platform tonight. And to know that, Lord, there's nothing that you can't see them through as long as they're willing to do the next right thing that honors you. To seek you with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. So bless them tonight, Lord. Bless each one within the sound of my voice. And may they leave here tonight recognizing how much hope and healing and restoration and deliverance and renewal you offer each one of them as they live mindfully in the present, paying attention to how they live so that they can bring honor and glory to you. I just thank you for each one tonight, and I pray a blessing upon them. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Hallelujah.